Hi, welcome to Chapter and Verse. With us we have a special guest today, Kaytlin Bailey. Now, Kaytlin she's the Director of Communications for Decriminalize Sex Work and the host of the Oldest Profession podcast, available wherever podcasts are. Kaytlin has a history degree from the College of Charleston, South Carolina. One of the things that drew me to this subject has to do with it seems like it's nonchalance of murderers, where they think that it's somehow okay if they kill just prostitutes or sex workers and drug addicts. There's a case in the news right now. The guy's last name is Little, and I think his first name might be Benjamin or Samuel, but it'll be in the news. And he killed, the police thought that he had killed 3 people. And then he said, he didn't like the jail he was in. So he said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll confess to more murders if you'll get me to a nicer place. And they said, okay, but they weren't really sure that this is a valid deal. But he gave them the locations of a number of bodies, and they searched the places and found out that indeed he had murdered more sex workers. And then it was up to 50. As of last night, it was up to about 100.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not an uncommon story. You know, I know that there are many jurisdictions all over the country that actually, if a sex worker is murdered, or if a homeless person is murdered, or if a known drug addict is murdered, they'll mark it down as no humans involved, and it just becomes not a priority. So serial killers have been targeting, sex workers for a long time because they know that they can get away with it. And there's kind of a collective idea that we are disposable people, which I think runs so contrary to the idea of human compassion or a just system. I mean, there was that Border Patrol agent that considered himself a vigilante for killing prostitutes. And as somebody from New York, I can tell you that the Long Island killer got away with murder for years. He's still not been caught, targeting mostly sex workers and people that were walking on the street. And there were people that had information about this killer. They wanted to report it to the police, but they couldn't do that without admitting to engaging in prostitution themselves,
Which is a crime.
And so it's the fact that we've criminalized the oldest profession that makes sex workers so vulnerable to all kinds of violence, including being targeted by serial killers. And we could catch more of these murderers if we could call the police and report crimes that are committed against us.
Yes, and you were saying that the police were unwilling to offer immunity.
They were unwilling to offer immunity in exchange for information about a notorious serial killer because they'd rather arrest somebody for prostitution than catch a killer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a megacept.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it just shows how skewed our priorities are in the criminal justice system. You know, we're not trying to help vulnerable people. We're trying to target them, criminalize them. You know, we've criminalized poverty in this country. Looking at the bail system, there are a lot of people that have never been convicted of a crime that are sitting in jail because they can't afford bail.
One of the things I was hoping to do, and we can do this, is to do a review of what the Bible has to say about sex workers.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit before the recording of this program about the fact that Jesus went out of his way to reach out to the outcasts and the marginalized.
Including prostitutes.
Yeah,
you know, Jesus is one of the few figures, he never uses a euphemism when he talks about old pros. Yeah. He was very comfortable amongst our kind. He's a very forgiving person. Yeah.
He is, I should say, because we believe that it's not just in the past tense.
Yes.
There's in Hebrews 11:31, there's something called the Faith Hall of Fame. And there's a prostitute there in the Faith Hall of Fame. Her name is Rahab. And that's a rather auspicious company in which to dwell. And yet there she is,
Yep.
Rahab. She was an accomplice with the Israelite army to help to hide them
Yeah.
from otherwise certain death. I think that's correct. She hid them when there was a manhunt looking for them, and she gave the army false directions. She said that they were headed out near the hills, and they flooded the hills to try to find them and couldn't find them because they were hiding in her apartment.
She sounds like a really brave woman.
Brave woman, yeah.
Yeah. You know, sex workers and soldiers have gone together for thousands and thousands of years.
The word hooker comes from is it the Civil War?
I think that's the myth. The word hooker was derived from, I think, General Hooker and the women that would follow his army. But you know, we know that wasn't the first army to be followed by women. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we were talking earlier too about something else, which was, to me, it was rather touching, and to you, I'm sure as well. Jesus was invited to a party in his honor by a Pharisee, and while he was there was somebody, we don't really know that much about her. She's often referred to as Mary Magdalene, but it doesn't say that in the Bible. So, but there was a lady there who had an alabaster jar of expensive fragrance. She could have used that as collateral for a loan or something like that. It was a very expensive thing. And she took it and broke the alabaster jar, and poured the fragrance on Jesus' head.
As an act of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she washed his feet with her tears. And this didn't go unnoticed by Jesus. It didn't go unnoticed by the Pharisee either. The Pharisee said, this man, to himself, he was thinking this. He said, this man is supposed to be a prophet? What sort of prophet is he that doesn't know what manner of woman touches him?
Right.
And then Jesus...
Meaning that she was a prostitute.
Probably. Yeah, probably. And I just got off my train of thought for just a second.
Well, what was Jesus' reply to this thought?
Well, he said to the Pharisee, he said, I have a question for you. Who would love more? Someone who was forgiven a little or someone who was forgiven a lot?
Yeah.
And the Pharisee said, by the way, he was reading the Pharisee's mind. The Pharisee didn't say that. He just thought that Jesus was a fake.
Yeah.
But Jesus read his mind and asked him the question, which drew out his answer, that the person who was forgiven a lot will love more.
Yeah, I think that's why Mary Magdalene becomes this, great symbol of forgiveness. Whether she was a sex worker or not is debated by historians and religious scholars, and I certainly don't have any insight into that. But for a long time, especially during the Middle Ages, she was celebrated as a notorious sex worker that found forgiveness and was able to follow in the steps of Jesus. And I think it's a really powerful story. And I feel like sex workers now in this society are such a symbol of outcasts and people that are stigmatized and silenced and shamed. And I think that how we treat them, how society treats us, really, is a marker of our compassion and capacity to forgive. And so I think that, sicking the police on us and spending taxpayer dollars to punish people for doing what they think they need to survive, really, I think, betrays our worst instincts as a society. And I'll tell you this, once you're convicted of doing sex work, it is so much harder to get out, because now you have this criminal record. It's harder for you to get a job. People have their kids taken away. A lot of negative, terrible things happen, not as a result of selling sex, of engaging in the sex industry, but of having this record and this scarlet letter that follows you around, and it becomes harder for us to forgive. So, I think if Jesus can forgive women in the Bible, and they could become, some of his most celebrated followers. I mean, Mary Magdalene is, responsible for spreading the word of Christ throughout the world.
Oh, yes.
I think that we should take his example.
That woman in the story, Jesus said something about her that is in the Bible today. He said, basically, that her act of love will be part of the story, of his story, for as long as the Bible is told.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the names and contributions of women have been erased, many times and for many reasons across this history. So it's very touching and telling, I think, that we still have this story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like he said we would.
Yeah. I believe, and you'll have to tell me the specific verse, but it was Jesus who said that, prostitutes and taxpayers will get into heaven before hypocrites.
Yes.
And people who are, I think that
Yes.
one of the things that I really appreciated about, what Jesus teaches us about compassion and forgiveness is that, righteousness and judging other people can feel really good, but it often leads to horrible.
Oh, it's terrible. It's the sin of pride, which is the one thing we're told we should never do.
Right.
The Bible describes it as the devil's own sin.
Right.
So we're not in good company if we are judgmental.
Yeah, thinking that we know best. It's difficult to know another person's life and what led them to make the choices that they're making.
In Matthew 1, Jesus' royal genealogy is mentioned by Matthew. Tamar, in Matthew 1:3, who was a prostitute involved in an incestuous relationship with her father-in-law.
Yeah, an unfortunately common story.
And then Rahab, Matthew 1:6, we talked about her earlier from Hebrews 11:31. Mary, the mother of God, she was an unwed mother.
Yeah.
And some of the writers at the time took advantage of their opportunity to describe her as an adulteress, and said that Jesus was the product of a Roman soldier, a liaison between Mary and a Roman soldier, and that story is still with us today.
Right.
Bathsheba, David's cohort, is mentioned in the royal genealogy of Matthew, but not her name. She's referred to as Uriah's wife.
Yeah.
Uriah met an unfortunate circumstance, very unfortunate, and God continues to call her Uriah's wife, not David's wife, but Uriah's wife. Then we have a situation in the book of Hosea, where Hosea's wife, her name is Gomer. Hosea is spelled Hosea, and Gomer is Gomer.
Yeah.
And she was a prostitute, and she has come to represent everybody,
Yeah.
all of us, except Jesus,
I know.
everybody who sinned.
I know a lot of sex workers feel that way. I think that we can sometimes take on, at least symbolically, like all of society's sin. I know that I certainly felt when I was seeing clients very much like I was acting as, a confessional in a way for people to bring me to unburden themselves, in my company. And so I think that, sex workers they're very special people, and they have a very special experience. And I think we make a mistake when we chase and we persecute and we judge and we punish these special people.
Oh, I just had a thought, and then it just zipped away.
Yeah.
I'm getting older, I'm afraid.
Aren't we all?
Oh, well. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you. In the Bible, it says that when people have sex, there's a very special bond which can happen between them. I imagine. Have you felt that bond?
I mean, I'm engaged, and I've certainly felt that bond with my fiance. But, I've had lots of different kinds of sex with lots of different kinds of people, and I've felt very different things about it.
Yes.
It takes all kinds of kinds, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems that a sex worker, especially today, where sex work is criminalized, can meet some terrible people.
Well, I met more terrible people dating than I ever did doing sex work. I would tell you that's
Really?
Oh yeah, it's not having sex with people that are distasteful is not unique to the sex industry, for sure.
I remember at a wedding party once, one of the bridesmaids said that her history was kissing a lot of frogs.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. We're all looking for Prince Charming. Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about Jesus of Nazareth? What do you think about him when you think about him?
I think that he is a great example of forgiveness and compassion, and a great leader. I think that so many of his words bring such comfort to so many people and inspire our better angels, especially in dealing with marginalized people, talking about the homeless or immigrants, or sex workers or criminals. It's important to remind ourselves that we are all vulnerable and that we are all in need of forgiveness.
Yes, so very true. Have you found yourself in dangerous situations?
Not as a sex worker, but in life. I've worked as a stand-up comic. I've worked as a waitress. I live in New York. I am, a person that lives in the world. So, I've been close to car accidents. I've been, in relationships that were dangerous. But I didn't experience that as a sex worker, which makes me very lucky.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm sorry that you had to experience that in a social relationship.
Yeah. But nothing compared to my father, who was a soldier for 30 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, PTSD.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, after 3 wars.
Tell us what it's like to be in a criminalized situation.
It's very, how do I put it? Being a sex worker means that you're sort of permanently a second-class citizen. It means I knew the second that I put that first ad up before I I screened my first client or ever took my first appointment, that I would never be able to report crimes committed against me. That if anything went wrong, I was on my own, not just in that situation, but really forever. When I was working I was working in a kitchen, and one of my bosses sexually harassed me, and I knew that I couldn't report that, because if my sexual history was discovered, that would be used against me, and that I might face criminal persecution trying to report a predator at work. So, yeah, I know that I am not alone in feeling that. It means that you can't use any of the systems that are available to other people. You can't report crimes to the police. There are many social services that you can't use. If you're ever caught, then that's used against you for future employment. I know people who have been kicked out of their homes, and I know people who have lost their children.
Lost their children.
Yeah. The modern sex worker rights movement actually started in a church.
Really?
Yeah. On June 2nd, 1975, 200 street-based sex workers in Lyon, France, occupied the Church of Saint Nazaire with a local priest who was really a hero of the sex worker rights movement, and they were protesting police brutality and corruption. Mm-hmm. And their banner said, "Our children do not want their mothers in jail." And I think that is really the basic cry of, we have this Madonna whore complex. We believe that, women are one thing or they're another. And I think that every sex worker knows that we can be both. We can be all things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some guys seem to fluctuate. In the Madonna whore paradigm, they'd say, well, that a sex worker has no dignity. Sometimes they seek. There was a song by the Eagles, and it said, "I've been searching for the daughter of the devil himself. I've been searching for an angel in white."
Yeah, it's very confusing, and this dichotomy, this paradigm has been used to silence women across the spectrum for the whole time, right? Because it's interesting, virgins, they don't know anything, so you shouldn't listen to them. And whores know too much, so you shouldn't let them talk. So it's either way. It's used as an excuse to silence women. My own fiance and I met when we were in high school. We've known each other for over 16 years, and he knows all about my history. But he was raised with this paradigm, and so it's been an interesting conversation coming along. But I knew that I would never marry anyone and could never partner with somebody long term that didn't accept my whole person, that asked me to hide or diminish or lie about a piece of myself.
Yes.
And being a sex worker is a part of my history, and it's not a part of my history that I'm ashamed of. It's made me who I am, just like being a soldier made my father who he is.
Yes. What do you think is the near future for the decriminalization movement? I
really hope that we're able to decriminalize sex work in a few states. And I hope that is a philosophical key that opens many doors to a more compassionate future. I think that we need to really radically change the relationship between police and society. We have one of the largest populations of prisoners in the world, the highest percentage of our population in the freest country on earth. I think that we've criminalized poverty, and I think that we're caging people as a solution to all kinds of problems, and it's no solution at all. Putting somebody in prison ought to be, the last resort, not the first thing that we do. So I think that decriminalizing prostitution, it's going to allow sex workers to report crimes against them, so that we can go after the real criminals, men that hurt women. And I think that it's going to free up a lot of resources. If you want to end trafficking in this country, if you want to end exploitation, then the resources that are going right now to hunting consensual adults who are having sex ought to be redirected in providing beds for vulnerable people, food, shelter, the things that drive people to do this work.
You often, I found, when I get into politics or social matters, we try to present both sides.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, this is 2019 that we're in now. In about 2009, there was an effort to criminalize women in their own homes.
Yep. Yeah, Rhode Island was actually decriminalized indoor sex work for many, many years before 2009, and there have been a lot of studies that came out. Gonorrhea went down 40%, reported rapes went down 30%. There are a lot of benefits from simply not criminalizing adult women who are engaged in private consensual sex. But on our staff, so I work for an organization called Decriminalize Sex Work, and we want to end trafficking and improve public safety by stopping the criminalization of the oldest profession. And on our staff, we have an incredible woman, Crystal DeBoss, who is one of the leading anti-trafficking experts in the world. She got one of the very first anti-sex trafficking grants under the Clinton administration in the 1990s, and she's come to the same conclusion that Amnesty International, the World Health Organization, and lots of other rights-based organizations have, that decriminalizing sex work is the best way to end trafficking and exploitation of women.
At the time when a representative of the anti-trafficking movement came on the program, there was nobody to present a contrasting view.
Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? As a sex worker, you are shamed into silence. You carry a stigma around with you for the rest of your life, and that's if you don't go to jail. I'm very lucky. I have a fiance that loves me. I have a steady income. I'm very privileged. I'm white. I have an education background. My parents know I'm out as a sex worker. But it makes a lot of sense to me why somebody wouldn't want to stand up and declare that they've done this work.
I tried very hard to find a representative of law enforcement to be on with us tonight. Yeah. I tried for a month. I worked very hard at this. I was unable to find someone who's willing to come on.
It's interesting. It's I've been talking about this for a long time, and I know a lot of police officers, and we're friendly. And I'll tell you that privately, they'll tell you that they know that they can't end sex work. That it doesn't matter how many people that they arrest. It's the oldest profession. It predates us as a species. But unfortunately, over the last 30 years, a lot of police departments' funding depends on conflating trafficking with adult sex work. So they'll arrest, an adult woman that chose to do sex work as her work, and they'll bully her into pretending that she was, trafficked by some person. And so the Vice Department's funding is dependent on that. There's a lot of it's quite a racket, actually. So
we've got about 30 seconds.
Oh goodness,
we have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for shedding a light on old prose in the Bible. I didn't realize that Jesus had come from such a long line of such esteemed women. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
And I hope to have you back sometime.
I would love to come back. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me. It's an important conversation.
It really is.
Yeah.